Okay, today let's talk about a decision that's just come out of the Auckland District Court here in good old New Zealand. Headline is man discharged without conviction after punching 71-year-old at Posey Parker event. So this is the event that Kellie-Jay Keen attended here in New Zealand in March 2023 in Auckland's Albert Park. She was doused with tomato juice. Kellie-Jay was treated to the most disgusting amount of anti-hospitality that I have ever seen New Zealand put on with anybody. So I was quite ashamed to call New Zealand my home at that time. And that was another court case that's coming up soon is Eli Rabashkine. So Eli is the guy who assaulted Kellie-Jay Keen in Auckland when she was here to speak at a Let Women Speak rally, which she convened. She came all the way from the UK, stopping over in Australia, of course, but came all the way from the UK to speak to women in New Zealand at Albert Park. She cancelled her Wellington rally as well, which would have been really disappointing for a lot of people down there too. I've never seen anybody treated so badly in New Zealand as Kellie-Jay Keen was. It was absolutely disgraceful. And what was really surprising at the time, I can recall, because I'd never heard of Kellie-Jay Keen before, so I can recall thinking to myself at the time, it's like, oh, here's someone from the UK who's some sort of an activist and rah-rah-rah and coming down here and telling us how we're going to do it all. And of course she got the short shift, which most people over here probably not knowing anything about it would have probably been going, oh yeah, whatever. But in fact, Kellie-Jay Keen is a incredibly courageous woman, and she's not I wouldn't say that she's an anti-trans activist. That's how they describe her. She's a feminist. That's all. She's a feminist, and she actually is. I mean, this country over here has just voted essentially for on her side of the fence, if you will. She's certainly not a left-wing member of the Wokarati. Like, she wouldn't get on with Jacinda Ardern or Chris Hipkins, for that matter, who was Prime Minister and presided over the debacle that happened in March 2023. Anyway, I digress. The man admitted punching a 71-year-old woman during the protest, and he's been discharged without conviction. He was granted permanent name suppression. He appeared in the Auckland District Court on Monday, that's today, where his lawyer, Emma Priest, sought for him to be discharged without conviction. The 21-year-old was charged after activist, she keeps calling an activist, the 21-year-old was charged after feminist Kellie-Jay Keen-Minshull, also known as Posey Parker, was set to speak at Auckland's Albert Park in March. And so presiding over the district court hearing was Judge Kevin Glubb, and he said the offending was moderately serious given that the woman was punched in the head, so it's an attack not only to a person of vulnerable age but in a vulnerable place on her body. Judge Glubb, however, accepted that the man was genuinely remorseful and acted in a way that was completely out of character. And on the balance, given his neurodiversity, Judge Glubb accepted a conviction would be out of proportion to the gravity of the offending and discharged. Judge Glubb said that did not detract from the impact the offending had on the victim. There's a couple of things in that need to be clarified. Okay, for a start, neurodiversity. Now, given the fact that the protest was largely conducted by a bunch of people who are men who like to pretend that they're women and call that diversity, gender diversity. We should clarify that neurodiversity actually is it goes on later in this article, and it's actually ADHD and I can't remember what the other things was, but we'll get back to them. So neurodiversity isn't anything about gender. It's about this person basically has a mental illness. What I do have a problem with here is a slight technical point, and it's just a legal point. Judge Clubb accepted a conviction would be out of proportion to the gravity of the offending. What the actual legal test is slightly different to that is it's a conviction would be out of all proportion to the gravity of the offending and did a just discharge. So I'm assuming that this has just been misreported, and hopefully the judge didn't apply the wrong test. Then goes on to said that the defendant must prove to the community and the victim you can be a good man moving forward and that you'll not get involved in protest action. Make this the last time you're before the court, Judge Clubb told him. The victim, who was left with concussion and bruising, told the court on Monday she has suffered since that day in March last year and her happy-go-lucky nature has disappeared. Any loud noises and severe stress and uncharacteristic behaviours, anger and distress. And she goes on to say this, I've lost trust. I've lost the trust I had in New Zealand. I truly loved and believed in this country. I still think as a whole New Zealand has the best people in the world. I've met and been supported by many of them, she said. Obviously she wasn't referring there to New Zealand being the best people in the world in terms of the rabble of misfits and mentally ill. I don't know how to describe them, but all of them that turned up and gave Kellie-Jay a really bad time and justifiably left her with a bad impression of New Zealand, and to our detriment, she may never ever step foot here again because of what happened. So we've all lost out because of that. So thanks for you idiots up in Auckland there. The woman asked for the man to be named, so the victim wanted the man to be named. However, this is what his lawyer said. Emma Priest said this was a unique set of circumstances that would never be repeated by her client, who has ADHD and autism, and got caught up in the frenzy Posey Parker protests. So to a degree, really, I mean, this is one of the big problems with these protester people and the whole trans activism movement is that because their whole gender ideology is based really on the reality behind it is mental illness. Because of that, you tend to see a lot of people who are who have some sort of mental illness gravitating around that kind of ideology. And so to a degree I can see that this young man would have been caught up with the ideology, and of course not having the mental presence of mind to be able to see through it like most sane and rational people, easy to get led astray. So I do have a degree of, not, dare I say it, sympathy? No, it's not sympathy, but understanding, perhaps a degree of appreciation as to how this young man was led astray. Anyway, Emma Priest went on to say she said a conviction would be out of proportion to his offending, supposed to be out of all proportion again, and would result in difficulty in the young man gaining employment. So for an assault charge like that would be fairly serious. I'm not sure, was it aggravated assault or assault? I'm just trying to go back up here. Punching. Doesn't actually say what he was charged with. See, this is an example of this kind of reporting. So they're not honest because they tend to leave that. I mean, this is probably aggravated assault. maybe assault causing injury or something like that. I'm not sure. Anyway, his ADHD and youth amplified his impulsivity on that day. Priest said her client had taken responsibility, was truly remorseful and willing to engage in restorative justice, which was declined. So the 71-year-old victim of this really isn't interested in all of this nonsense. That's hardly surprising. Their ideologies would be, I imagine, on different sides of the fence. By the time you're 71, you have grown up, found out how the world really works, and stopped your ill-conceived journey through left-wing politics and have moved more over to the right. And so you're talking about a 71-year-old who has had all of that life experience and knows exactly where she should be and where everybody should be. And then we have a 21-year-old who's still wandering around in the battlefields of left-wing ideology. So there we go. You can expect two people on polar opposite ends in that regard. So since the offending, the offender has undertaken 180 hours of volunteer work at the Red Cross and completed the Man Alive program and counselling sessions, Priest said. So he's made a pretty reasonable... that actually makes me think that there was a fairly serious charge here. That sounds more like penance for something a bit more than common assault. I may be wrong. I'll try and have a look at that in a minute. The man also offered to pay $1,000 in reparation. The police prosecutor said police recognised there was high feeling during the protest. Well, they could have done something about enforcing the rights of women to have a rally and be heard and not shut down. But Kellie-Jay is very reasonable. She, gosh. But she was also attacked. Of course, she was covered in tomato juice. So the guy who did that, the bloke who did that is one Eli Rubashkine. But Eli, he is not doing himself any good at all, and says this. This is a quote from the woke left-wing doomed news hub that's just been, as we discussed before, closed down. This is what Rubashny said about his attack on Kellie-Jay. I achieved everything I wanted to do, and I want tomatoes to be a symbol of trans liberation. So he wants tomatoes to be a symbol of trans liberation, trans intersex, and non-binary liberation. That's what I want, he told Q-Tone Media. So there's a number of questions that we have in regard to that. The first one, obviously, it's the first three, really. The first one is, what's trans liberation? What do you mean by that? What are you planning on being liberated from? Second, trans intersex. So you want tomatoes to be a symbol of trans intersex. I'm not sure. Why would you want tomatoes to be a symbol of trans liberation intersex? And finally, non-binary liberation. Again, what is non-binary liberation? What would... Okay, so non-binary more than two. How would you liberate more than two? So any number greater than two, you want that liberated. What exactly do you want that liberated from? Mr. Rubashkin, your comments are irrational. Anyway, I digress from the original story that we were doing on here about what happened in regard to this young man in Auckland being discharged without conviction. He's been given a get-out-of-jail-free pass for what was quite a serious offence. The person punched in the face was A, a woman, B, she was 71 years old. So really bad form. And we can only hope as a country that Kellie-Jay will take and accept our sincerest apologies and our absolute guarantee that we've changed our feathers, we've gotten rid of that woke Labor government. I would say that they will be the last woke Labor government that I ever see in my lifetime. The tide has well turned against that kind of incoherent, non-cogent thinking and policies that they bring out. So hopefully Kellie-Jay will realise that we have turned a corner in New Zealand and we're well on top of the wokery. So the 21-year-old gets a hospital pass, which is, gosh, is that fair enough? I think that the person's been warned. It's obviously gone on their record that they're going to do a discharge without conviction. So if they do something again, if this man does something again, punches another 71-year-old, or is, starts to offend in any other way, there'll be very severe consequences for them, I would imagine. A discharge without conviction isn't entirely free. It's going to be known that you've received that. So, and one other interesting thing about that is the fact that, I haven't seen, this is why I want to have a look at this, because if you were a 21-year-old man and you punched a 71-year-old woman at a feminist rally and caused her the harm that was caused to her, you could expect to be charged fairly stiffly, like aggravated assault. Let's have a quick look. Let's have a look in the Crimes Act. Now, if you injure somebody and you punch them in the face and you injure them, for example, cut their face or something like that, you're immediately up for, an assault causing injury type of charge, which carries some pretty stiff penalties. The most common one is common assault, and common assault is really, you would be able to punch a person and simply go no further than common assault. But, okay, so everyone is liable 3 years, so it's a category 2 offence, not exceeding, with intent to commit or facilitate the commission of any imprisonable offence or avoid detection, avoid the arrest or facilitate flight. So it's not going to be aggravated assault. Could be injuring with intent. Common assault. So it's fairly low level. 1 year sentence maximum for common assault. Injuring by an unlawful act. It injures such person to death that he would have been. So it'd be hard to get that across the line for a hard to get that across the line. Everyone is liable to a term of 14 years. Gosh. With reckless disregard of the safety of others, wounds, maims, disfigures, or causes grievous bodily harm to any person. So it could have been wounding with intent. I don't know. Let's see if we can find a report on our more reliable media, and we might be able to find what the charge was. A young man who was filmed punching a 71-year-old woman in the head during the heated Kellie-Jay Keen counter-protest in Auckland last year has been granted a discharge without conviction and permanent name suppression. His lawyer, Emma Priest, said the man aged 20 at the time of the assault. His lawyer, Emma Priest, said the man aged 20 at the time of the assault was caught up in what she described as the frenzy of the counter-protest in March last year and had now taken full responsibility. He suffered from ADHD and autism and had undertaken counselling and rehabilitation, along with completing 180 hours of community work at the Red Cross. Priest told Judge Kevin Glubb, the Auckland District Court, he admitted a charge of common assault at the earliest possible opportunity, she said. Police opposed the discharge without conviction but did not oppose the request for permanent name suppression. So he did order the victim to pay. The judge granted the discharge without conviction and permanent name suppression, but ordered him to pay $1,000 reparation to the victim, Judith Hobson. And Judith made her views of the verdict clear as she left the court today. "You're a lying little bastard," she said to him. She told the court that since the assault, she'd been unable to go out and interact with people. She could not sleep without taking medication, and any noise caused severe stress. She said, "The crime itself has had a huge impact on my general well-being," she said. As you would expect, 71-year-old, really. He should not be able to hide behind name suppression, she thought. The defendant was charged in April, nearly a month after the short-lived visit to New Zealand by... this is interesting. Now we get to a more non-partisan description of Kellie-Jay Keen in the New Zealand Herald by... So the defendant was charged in April, nearly a month after the short-lived visit to New Zealand by controversial British speaker Kellie-Jay Keen-Minshull, a self-described women's rights activist, better known as Posy Parker, who has been labelled by critics an anti-transgender rights activist. So there you go. There's a far more accurate description of Kellie-Jay by a far less left-hard news media outlet. Judge Glubb said Hobson and the young man were both at the protest on March the 25th when people began removing barriers separating the small of protesters there to hear Parker, so the small group of protesters there to hear Parker, from a much larger group of pro-trans rights counter-protesters. Counter-protesters pushed over the metal barricades and began approaching a group there to hear Parker speak. So here we have the very people who want to be heard and they want their place and they don't want to be excluded and they want to be, they want an inclusive society, but only if you don't disagree with them. The moment you bring somebody in to speak who's got a view that's different to theirs, it all goes to hell in a handbag. No pun intended. Hobson put out her hands to stop them and made contact with the opposing group. The young man saw this and punched a 71-year-old 3 times in the head, believing she had assaulted a fellow counter-protester. She suffered concussion and bruising to her eye and behind her left ear. 3 times in the head. Not once, 3 times. That's different. That, you see, here it is. On the left-wing thing, he punched the woman in the head. But on here we get the facts. He actually punched her 3 times in the head. A 21-year-old punching a 71-year-old in the head, a 71-year-old woman in the head, a 21-year-old man punching a 71-year-old woman in the head 3 times. No, I'm sorry, that goes beyond discharge without conviction. That is 3 times worse than punching her once. I have now changed my position. I believe that this person should have been convicted. 3 times, not acceptable. Once you can forgive as being impulsive, when you follow it up with 2 more shots, you're no longer being impulsive. You are being deliberate. You are being intentional. She suffered a concussion and bruising eye. Priest said her client's autism and had causatively linked to the offending by a leading specialist. His actions occurred amid a stressful situation where he felt threatened and were not an example of gratuitous violence. He felt threatened? He's 21 years old. She's 71 years old. Come on. She's 50 years older than him. He felt threatened. He's there with the violent rabble. They're the ones pushing the barriers over. She's simply there with a small group to hear Kellie-Jay, a much smaller group than what the trans activists were. That's disgraceful. That is absolutely disgraceful. Where he felt threatened. I mean, come on, priest, for goodness sakes. This is an issue with various members of the legal fraternity in New Zealand. They get up and they tell courts, they tell judges, bollocks, just bullshit, just plain bullshit. And she should be ashamed of herself saying that. That should earn a complaint to the Law Society. He felt threatened. Please. Good grief. Prosecution highlight the disparity of youth and strength between the defendant and the victim and how unfair and how unbalanced that is. I absolutely agree. It's not often I would agree with a police prosecutor. They are generally just as much lizards as the defence, but in this case, this particular blue reptile, I do agree with them. Wow. Okay. And we got a picture there that I'll also put up, which is taken from above, which is again Kellie-Jay getting just harassed by these people. Judge Club recognised the man's rehabilitative efforts, including counselling and undertaking a Man Alive course, along with his 180 hours of voluntary community work. Court also recognised neurodiversity had an impact on the way people interact with others. I'm satisfied by a reasonably clear margin a conviction would be out of all proportion to the gravity of the offence. So in this news article, we get the correct test coming through. Today, I have given you the opportunity to prove to the community that you can be a good man going forward. Another person has been charged with assault for allegedly throwing tomato juice at Parker at the demonstration last year. That case remains between the courts. The charge against the then 20-year-old LGBTQ rights activist came out. Footage circulated widely on Twitter showing a heated meeting of the two groups that day. In video, he can be seen striking the woman in the face. Common assault carries a possible sentence of... so there we go. We finally find out what the charge was. It was common assault. So that pretty much covers what's going on with the latest court cases, the aftermath of Kellie-Jay Keen's unfortunately incomplete trip to New Zealand and her speaking engagements in Auckland and Wellington. And again, we can only hope that one day she forgives us and gives us another try. So if you enjoyed this content, click like and subscribe to sign up to this channel and be notified of future content as soon as it drops right here exclusively on YouTube. Stay frosty.